I'm Steve Reeder, and today we're here with Ruth Watson, and this is a Monrovia Moments being filmed by sophomore Aubrey Pearson. So, Ruth, what year did you graduate?
1949.
And so, what were some of your childhood experiences like growing up on a farm?
Well, you didn't go anyplace because we milked cows.
Right.
And
what was that? Your dad did that. What was that process like?
well, we didn't even have electricity.
Sure.
So we had a room in the barn that was the engine room.
Sure.
And that's the way they milked. And when Daddy would be in the fields, he'd want us to start the milking, and Mother could never get the milker to stay on a cow.
No.
Because it would fall off if
Right.
you let it get too much air in it. And
So, how old were you when you were doing this?
I don't even know. I wasn't very old.
Sure. And then you told me before that there are a lot of restrictions, like it had to be really clean and
Oh, yes, yes. Oh, yes, when the milk inspector came, Daddy always sent me to the house.
No. And so how often did they come out to get the milk?
Every day.
Every day.
Mhm.
Okay. And about how much milk do you think that you had every day?
Well, I don't know. We had those big milk cans.
Sure.
And all I know was I got awfully tired of stirring the milk to cool it.
Now, when you were little, you lived over off Gordon Road, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And
They finally tore that old house down.
it caught fire not too long ago, and that was kind of the Kenworthy farm.
Yes.
And you had told a great story to me about when you were younger. Claude Lumpkin lived with you,
Uh-huh.
and one of Claude's jobs was to make sure you got on the bus.
Oh, yes.
And why were you afraid of getting on the bus?
I wasn't afraid. I just didn't want to go
Oh.
to school.
There wasn't nothing about the cows at the end of the road?
Well, there were some Jersey heifers that would come to the fence, and the fence was just 3 rows of
Yeah.
barbed wire. And I would say they were looking at me, and I would meet Mother with a switch.
Okay. So when you had, the last time we had talked, you had mentioned a little bit about Monrovia during the Great Depression. And you had commented that it didn't seem like the Great Depression had impacted Monrovia as much as other areas because a lot of people were self-sufficient. So you didn't remember like any of the programs or any of...
No, I
Okay.
was a little young for that.
The one thing you did talk about during that time period was the thrashing ring, or the
Yeah.
Okay, explain what that was.
Well, the thrashing machine was a great, big, monstrous thing, and I don't even know who owned it. All I know was the thresher's coming tomorrow, and they would move it, and the thing, I could walk faster than it moved. And it went from farm to farm.
Sure.
And,
So everybody just shared it.
oh yeah,
And so when they came and did your farm, all the men would be in the field, and what did all the women do?
cooked.
Right, and so you were cooking for how many people?
I don't even know.
Yeah.
I was young, and I never will forget a lady passed out.
Sure. But you kind of had talked before, like it was one thing that made Monrovia kind of unique was this kind of being neighborly.
Oh,
Everybody
yeah.
just helped everybody
Oh,
else
yeah,
out.
Yeah, they just went from farm to farm, and the straw was blown into a big pile.
Okay.
And the men they would rest their teams
Sure.
and unhook them, and then the men ate a great big meal and laid around under the trees and let the horses rest.
Okay.
And
Now, growing up on West Union and Gordon Road there, in the past, you had talked about Lena Henley.
Mm-hmm.
And she had lived on that house on 39 or on West Union there, and she was one of the Quakers there,
Uh-huh.
and you had given a lot of her material to the local history project with the house and things like that. You had mentioned her funeral.
Mm-hmm.
So what was that Quaker funeral like?
It was different.
Yeah.
You just sat in the church and you could hear that clock tick, 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 you know.
Sure.
And somebody would get up and say something. And that was the only Quaker
Sure.
funeral that I remember going to.
Now, when you had went on the tour of Monrovia on the bus, when we were at 30 or at Bunker Hill and West Union, you had said that there was a sawmill there at one point.
Mhm.
The Schraders, so they had a sawmill there.
It wasn't that far over.
Okay.
It was just east of where, oh dear, the name of this road that goes down by
39?
Steve's.
Okay, West.
It was just west of there,
Okay,
or east of there,
All right.
on the south side, and it set down between the creek and the road,
okay.
and that was
Now, when
the
you
Schrader farm.
right, and then there were. Do you remember anything about the sugar camps that the Schraders had?
No.
Okay. Now, you eventually left the Kenworthy farm and you moved to downtown.
Mm-hmm.
And your mom worked for the phone.
Mm-hmm.
And you had told a story that some nights you had to sleep in the office on the couch.
Mm-hmm.
And you have this great story about the party line.
Oh, yeah.
So tell us what happened with that and the eavesdropping.
Well, you might have 10 or 12 people on your line. And there was eavesdropping by certain women. And you knew who they were because she had a canary, and the canary would sing, sing, sing. And when I got older and got smart alecky, I would say, hang up.
So the phone house there was kind of where the festival building is at now.
Yes, it was up there next to the street.
And there was a creamery there at one point too,
Across
right?
the street, yes.
Okay. And then you had mentioned that a lot of the homes downtown had barns, because some people still had horses, but people still had milk cows.
Mm-hmm.
And so you had the creamery there, and then there was Dawson Pfeiffer's,
Mm-hmm.
and then there was, on the corner there was the Phillips gas station. Where was Doc Tansey? Was the vet still in town?
Doc Tansey was just south of the junction there.
Sure.
And on the east side of the street.
Okay.
And he lived in that yellow house.
Okay.
And he operated out of an old building that had great big bottles that sat on the shelves, and when somebody would come to town and need some kind of medicine for their animals, well, he would mix something up for them, and then he was kind of a character. He would operate on dogs and things, and when Bill McCracken married Maxine and they moved on back street there, she just had a fit, because she would go out her back door and walk up the alley to go uptown, and he would be operating on a dog hanging by his hind legs in front of the window, and he would knock on the window so she'd look.
Oh, wow.
And, she was not a country girl.
So you had the telephone office, and then today where the barber shop is at, that 2-story brick building, what was that when you were a kid? Because you told me at one point it was like a grocery store.
On
And
the
then-
south side of
yes,
the
and
street.
at one point it was Fincham's Restaurant.
Yes. Well, it was several different things. There was an old woman, and her name was McCracken. Her last
Sure.
name was McCracken, and she wasn't related to
Okay.
the other McCrackens. But she had a small grocery store
Okay.
in there.
But that has been a post office at one point, a carpenter, a real estate business. It has been multiple things. Now, the one thing that you and Bill Fisher had talked about was when you were a kid, you always wanted to go downtown to skate because that was the one place there was concrete to skate on. But what did the town do on Saturday nights?
Oh, everybody came to town and just visited.
Sure.
You know, the adults.
Yeah.
And the kids just ripped up and down the streets playing. Of course, there weren't any street lights or
Sure.
anything. And
But didn't they used to show a movie on the side of the bank?
oh yeah, that was on Saturday nights.
And you said they showed, this was for years they would do this, right? And mainly it was like a Western.
Yeah, usually
Yeah.
was.
So there was what the coin shop is now was the bank. And then was it Turley's that was next to that?
Yeah.
And then you had the post office and then Kenworthy's.
Now the post office was down on the other side was on the west end
Okay.
of where you went into the gym.
Okay, so at that point, the post office was in the gym.
Well,
It moved
it was
around
out
a lot.
on the street.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you've got great stories about the gym. And the one is the famous Monrovia Mooresville game.
Oh gosh.
So first off, just what was the gym like? I mean, today people talk about the gym like with such reverence, but
Oh yeah. Well, it was a ramp that you went in, you bought your ticket up there on the street, and then you kind of went down a ramp to the floor.
right.
But if you went straight, that's where the dressing rooms were. They were
Right.
underground,
Okay.
and that's where the ball players always.
And then the Legion met upstairs. Was there like a Legion hall too?
Yeah.
Okay. And there was a stage there in the gym at one end.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay. And then, so what happened with the Mooresville Monrovia game?
Well, it turned into.
We won the game, right? Monrovia did?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
There was so much excitement. I'm not even sure. I just remember the crowd just going down the street, fighting, reaching over the shoulders and hitting the guys. And,
You said the problem was people were turning their porch lights on.
oh, yeah.
And it just gave people more light to fight.
Oh, yes, they could see. And they fought all the way to 39.
Yeah, and like I think Max Green had another part to the story. He said that back then Mooresville was the big rival,
Oh, terrible.
and it wasn't quite imminence yet.
No.
And then he said that he remembers that when they beat Mooresville, some of the kids at school made a coffin out of Mooresville colors. And he was like in 3rd or 4th grade, and his teacher took them out of the classroom to burn it on the baseball diamond. Like they got to witness this. Like it was that big of a deal. So yeah, the fight was that was a great story there. Everybody appreciate the
Oh,
alumni
gosh.
banquet.
Oh.
Now crossing the street, people have a hard time today realizing just how much activity was going on in downtown Monrovia. Like you had several restaurants and gas stations and
Yeah, we always had at least 2 restaurants. There was one down by Dawson Pfeiffer's.
sure.
That was the sandwich shop, they
Right,
called it.
okay.
And a dance floor.
right.
And
It was
then-
between the Phillips station on the corner and Dawson's. Okay.
Yeah. There was a filling station on each side of it.
Okay.
Yeah. And I can remember seeing those women that worked there pull a gallon jug of chili out of the refrigerator and heat it up if somebody wanted a bowl of chili.
Now was Bateman's restaurant still in town at the time?
No.
So what was that building? So the brick building at the end by the Methodist Church?
It was, I can't tell you for sure what it was. I think it was idle for a while.
Okay.
But that used to be a restaurant.
Right. Okay. And then what's today's Main Street was Meyerings and was Dowden's.
Yeah. But
Who had it when you were younger?
Joe McCarthy.
Did Maxwell, was it Chalky Maxwell at one point was there?
Who?
Chalky Maxwell?
I don't know.
Okay.
He may have been before I knew who was there. But I can remember my mom taking eggs and stuff to town.
Sure.
And trade them for groceries.
And then Peach Bray was on the corner.
Yeah.
And then you said there was the Liars Bench where everybody would
gosh,
meet.
yes.
And then now across from that, today we looked at the video. It was there was a pharmacy on the corner at one point, wasn't there? And then a lot of people my age always refer to that as McLeod's, but back then there were two stores there.
Yeah, the drugstore was on the corner, and then White's
Okay.
grocery store.
And then today we looked at the video, and then there was a billiards at the end of the street there. Now, the one thing that has been a real favorite story is Monrovia during World War II. So talk about how you found out that that America was at war and people on the radios.
I can't really tell you exactly how I found it out, but I guess on the radio.
Yeah. But weren't a lot of people in town kind of glued to the radio that morning?
Oh, yeah. And but I know that my dad had to sign up
Sure.
and didn't know but what he'd be called.
Right.
And he did not
Sure.
get called. But he was 1A, and it was a scary situation.
Yeah, and Ed Ullman said that Kenworthy's was kind of a draft spot that people had to register at one point. And Max Green had said that he remembers a little bit about rationing, and the school would have kids collect scrap metal, and the school was kind of a focal point for that. And the one story that you have told was like, you had said that your family wasn't as impacted as much by rationing, and it kind of went back to the Depression because so many Monrovia farmers were self-sufficient. But your mom did kind of run into problems with rationing because she baked a lot with sugar. The other thing that you really went into about was Kirkendall, Sarge Kirkendall. He's the one Gold Star recipient for Monrovia. What was the reaction to the town when they found out about Sarge?
Oh, everybody was just really down, you know.
Sure.
Sarge was one of those guys that was always on the streets and having a good time and ha-ha and
Right.
carrying on. And yeah, it was quite, it was just real sad.
Sure.
And but there was, the town has changed a lot.
Yeah. The other thing that was just really interesting is when Victory in Japan, VJ Day, occurred, just tons of people went downtown, and you were one of them. So what was the experience like celebrating the victory in Indianapolis?
Well, you couldn't stir them with a stick.
Yeah.
And they were just all, everybody was just celebrating, you know, but they were just shoulder to shoulder. And there wasn't any of this, somebody shooting somebody, like they do nowadays.
How long did it take you to get from Monrovia to Indianapolis?
I don't even remember. I just remember going and being on the circle and walking, and everybody was just gay as a lark, of
Right.
course.
Now, when there was also some other things going on at the time with the rodeo. And it's kind of hard for some of the people to fathom that there was such a rodeo thing in Monrovia at the time. So what was your involvement with the rodeo at the time?
Well, I rode in it.
What was the name of your horse?
Colonel.
And the rodeo was at the Schrader farm?
Well, it moved out there.
Sure, okay.
It got too big for the, you went back behind the mill.
So there was originally it was there.
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah. Originally, it was there.
Okay.
And Rosamond Carter, I can remember her standing at the gate and selling tickets.
Sure.
And it didn't last long there because it outgrew it.
Right.
And so they moved on out to the edge of town and had lots of room.
And it just seems like everybody was in it, and it was so well attended. And there's a couple of newspaper articles, like when there would be like rodeos, and when the Monrovia contingent would show up at other places, they would always win like the attendance record. Or the attendance award, because so many people came. You were pretty young when all that was going on.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that you were really involved in was the 4-H. And so people have a hard time. The 4-H fair was at the school at one point, correct? And it was like 2 days?
Yeah.
And then, so how many people do you think were there for
I have no idea.
It was in the hundreds though, right?
Probably everybody in town went.
Right.
It was, for years, it was behind the old school.
Sure.
And I can remember one year it rained so hard that the judge he wore glasses and he couldn't see anything. And he got under the wagon to judge the animals so he could see.
Right. And they also,
And the mothers of the 4-H kids cooked and sold sandwiches.
but they also not only used that land there, but didn't they also use the school for some of the other projects and stuff?
Oh, yeah.
And so you attended the school there on the corner, and you had commented before that sometimes it was like really cold in the school, and
Oh, yeah.
and so you guys had a pretty strict dress code back then.
Oh, yes. If it was really, really cold, you could wear your snow pants under your dress.
But it got cold enough in the school that you would almost need to wear that.
Oh, yeah, we did lots
Yeah.
of times.
So
That big old furnace was heated with coal.
sure.
And of course, there wasn't such a thing as insulation
Right.
back then. So you just kind of roughed it.
Right. Now, you've also were involved with the Monrovia Homemakers. What did that do?
Well, it just kind of started out as a learning experience. They would come up with recipes and
Sure.
things for you to try. And then we had so many women that, of course, women didn't work there.
Sure.
And we had so many women that they had to break it off and start new clubs.
Okay.
And I can remember when I was real young going out to Elizabeth Bray's, that he lived on the farm
Sure.
out there, and she would give us lessons on making a centerpiece out of, for instance, centerpiece out of fruit that had been iced.
Okay.
It was different.
Sure. Now, your husband had a trucking business at one point, and then you went from that into a lot of agriculture with the pigs.
When the kids got in 4-H, That's when we had always had some animals.
Sure.
And, but then we went
Sure.
purebred.
And what was the purebred? What was
Hampshire.
Okay. And your husband not only had the trekking and then went into the purebred, but he also was a football father.
Mm-hmm.
So explain like what they did.
Oh gosh, I don't really know for sure. They were always working on the field, and because that was kind of new to us.
Yeah, they started the football program out of thin air, basically.
Oh yeah.
And the Hubbard family donated the concession stand, and the Judson family, the bleachers from the old gym, and then Shotter got the electricity. But you had a lot of parents that didn't really know a whole lot about football and started this program just pretty much overnight. And your husband was one of the original football fathers. So this last spring, you were inducted into the Alumni Hall of Fame. So you were a founder of the Monrovia Homemakers and two-time president, and you were involved with the local 4-H for like 25 years.
Yeah, I was a 4-H leader.
And then you had 10 years of service in 4-H.
I was a 10-year.
And your kids were, and grandchildren were.
Yeah.
And then you and your husband were grand marshals of the festival.
Yeah.
You were inducted into the Indiana Livestock Breeders Hall of Fame, and you're the first woman to be inducted.
Yes.
And then you were this year inducted into the Monrovia Alumni Hall of Fame. So the last question here is, what was that like? Were you surprised?
It was a shock.
Shocked? Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't. Didn't even think about it.
Sure.
I think Steve may have.
Move things along.
Yeah.
So, well, that was our last question here with Ruth Watson. So I'm Steve Reeder, and this is the Monrovia Moments, and thank you for watching.